who is our consultant with McClure, and a division of McClure is Alchemy, which is our creative placemaking team that has been leading this downtown West Monroe Streetscape Master Plan for about a year now. What you're going to see today is the actual final product that Alex and Greg are going to present to you by Zoom. We did allow some of the public to join in by Zoom. I believe we had 20 registered this morning. I'm not sure how many joined on, but that is available. I believe this Zoom meeting will also be recorded so it can be broadcast later through our city's Facebook page. And as Alex will talk to you in a little while, there is a master plan website that is going to be introduced today. So all the information you're seeing can be presented and viewed on the website. That will also be linked to the city's website. So I just want to take a moment to thank you all for being here. I'm Courtney Hornsby. I'm the Chief of Staff for Mayor Mitchell, and this has been our pleasure to undergo this process. It's been a long process, but it's been heavily involved with the community, and we thank you all for being here today. Thank Jenny at 111 Cotton Street for hosting us today. Plenty of space to be able to socially distance. And then I want to thank Adrian LaFrance well, our downtown, now our West Monroe Main Street manager. We're officially a Main Street community. And she jumped right in when she started with us just a little over a year ago to start the process. So thank all of you for being here. Alex, can you hear me?
I can. Can you all hear me?
Yes, Alex, we're going to turn it over to you and take it away. Let us know if you need us. I think Alex will present, and then there will be a time for questions afterwards. But Alex, the floor is yours.
All right, thanks, Courtney. Can everyone see my screen? I just want to confirm.
Yes.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Courtney, I appreciate the introduction. It's great for everyone joining in person and at home. While I wish we were there with you in person as well, obviously 2020 has been a bit of a crazy year, and we're doing the best we can to make sure we get this process done. We're really, really excited to show you the website that we have here today. If you want to join on your own device, the website is downtownwestmonroemasterplan.com. That's downtownwestmonroemasterplan.com. Now we have a PDF document. It is pretty lengthy. It is about 90 pages with a lot of detail. That PDF will be loaded onto this website if you'd like to dig in a bit deeper. But for all of our projects, we also create a website that's a bit easier to digest. It has a lot of imagery for you to really get the idea of where we're going here. But before we begin, I do want to thank everybody who has been a part of this process, the city staff, the mayor, the steering committee, and all of the residents have been awesome, providing us with really great feedback and guidance as we've gone through the process. I mean, we talked to students at West Monroe High School, we talked to property owners, business owners, and everything in between. And everyone has been gracious with their time and efforts in this process. So during this meeting, we want to provide you with a brief recap of the process and how we got here today. So we'll talk a little bit about the visioning, but we really want to dive deep into the priority projects that have come out as a result of the visioning process. My colleague Greg is going to go through the streetscape and infrastructure piece, and then I will wrap up with some of the other placemaking concepts that came out of this project. If you all remember, the initial goal of this or purpose of this plan was to develop some consistency with the streetscape as well as the infrastructure that is in downtown to make it more aesthetically appealing, but also to support the existing businesses that are there and try to incentivize more consumers to come downtown to shop locally. We also focused a little bit on some of the connectivity to the riverfront. We touched a bit on housing, which is part of the placemaking work that we did. And we also looked at some new cultural amenities that have the potential to come to downtown. Now, we always say that all of these plans are a living document. They can evolve, they will change. Some pieces of this project will change along the way, and that's okay. But this will serve as our guide as we start to develop and redevelop in downtown West Monroe. So I'm just going to use the website here as my guide and your visual aid to go through this process. So if you all remember, this project last July was funded through a $99,000 grant from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Rural Development. And this allowed the city to then hire us at McClure or Alchemy Community Transformations. We are a civil engineering company, and we specialize in strategic planning and also place-based economic development. So the city was able to bring us in to help guide the master plan process for downtown. During the visioning, we discussed several different topic areas that I'll discuss in a minute, but these are the 5 main projects that came out of this as a result, and that was the streetscape and public infrastructure, a multi-purpose food hall, a new distillery, some improvements to housing offerings, as well as some branding and complementary wayfinding for the downtown area. Just to speak a little bit more about the visioning process. We started with a steering committee that was led by 20 leaders from the community. We met with them throughout the entire process in order to get their feedback and guidance along the way. This was a diverse group that represented most demographics in the area, so we also did a visioning session with them. We did public visioning sessions with all of you, and we also did public input sessions along the way as well, as we were going deeper into the strategic planning process. But the key topics that we discussed at those visioning sessions included transportation and infrastructure, retail and nightlife, arts and culture, business development and entrepreneurship, workforce development and education, housing, and parks and recreation. So we covered a gamut of topics. Not everything is necessarily incorporated into the priorities that you see in the plan, but we really wanted to get a good idea of what was wanted, what is needed in the community. We also provided an online survey assessment. I hope that all or most of you took that survey assessment. We had 508 individuals participate, which is awesome for a community the size of West Monroe, and that's something you all should be proud of, is the community engagement that you had throughout this process. We had hundreds of people that attended the public input sessions as well as the visioning sessions, and we met one-on-one and in focus groups with several different groups across the community and individuals. Some of the key findings, I'll just briefly mention. When it came to streetscape design, about half of all participants responded that equal balance should be given to pedestrians, vehicle parking, multimodal, which is like bike lanes, as well as drive lanes. And then you'll see the rest is kind of trickling down: 20% for pedestrians as a focus, 17% parking, 8% multimodal, and then 6% drive lanes. So it seemed that downtown was desired to be more of a walkable space to drive more foot traffic. And then I want to mention the question here. When asked what could be added to downtown that would encourage residents to visit and shop local more frequently, most survey participants responded restaurants, retail shops, live music, and then a brewery, distillery, or wine bar. And so we believe what we were able to hit most of those, if not 3 out of the 4 of those, in some of the placemaking concepts that we came up with. When it came to housing, 51% of survey respondents said they would consider living downtown, and more than 56% of survey respondents participated that they would like to see more second-story condos or apartments in the downtown area as living options. Again, if you'd like to dig more into the process, this website also goes into the focus groups, the one-on-one interviews, and also the existing plans that we reviewed in order to get to the priority projects, which is what I want to discuss next. So as I mentioned previously, as a result of all of the visioning and guidance that we received from all the key stakeholders, the priority projects that we included in this plan are streetscape and public infrastructure, the multipurpose food hall, the distillery, downtown housing, and branding and wayfinding. But I will let Greg touch up on streetscape and infrastructure. Greg, would you like me to give the screen to you?
Please go ahead.
Okay.
All right, hopefully you all can see this now. My name is Greg Fow. I'm also here with McClure. I work primarily, I assist Alchemy with some of their projects, as you all know, but I also work kind of hand in hand with our transportation engineering team here at McClure, working on beautification, wayfinding, and aesthetics, if we haven't had a chance to do that introduction yet. I wish we would be able to be down there in person because throughout the course of this project, I think some of the public meetings that we've had great feedback and participation, a lot of opinions and thoughts given by the public and all the interested parties in the downtown area. So I really wish we were able to do this in person, but like as Alex mentioned, that's sort of the nature of how 2020 has been going. So appreciate you hanging in there with us today. The streetscape and infrastructure section. So as you know, downtown West Monroe has really become a historical destination for the community and the region. There's a transitioning mix of new and older retailers. There are regionally recognized festivals and special events that are occurring in the downtown area, and there's sort of a growing art culture within the downtown. So obviously we're going through a lot of change, and one of the key parts of this plan for us was to make sure that the streetscape in downtown West Monroe, as Alex has mentioned, can help support a lot of these additional businesses and some of the additional projects that she was looking at, in particular things like the distillery, the food hall, as well as ways for us to incorporate that new branding and wayfinding components. So really this is just one part of the holistic plan, but simply one of the things to know about downtown West Monroe, and you'll see this as you go through the website and even through the PDF document in more detail, is that the downtown streetscape in West Monroe in general has been developed over a period of different times and under different plans. One of the things that the downtown streetscape has been lacking is a very cohesive character to it, and you'll kind of see that as we go through this website here today. The intent of this study was really to create that cohesive plan so that as the streetscape is updated in downtown, there's one clear direction for things to move forward. The reason for this, some of the benefits to downtown West Monroe, you'll see highlighted here, but again, a distinctive and a unified streetscape design that will help support the downtown businesses. This includes things like ensuring that we have consistent street and sidewalk dimensions, parking configurations and stall sizes in particular, hardscape elements, light fixtures, seating, litter receptacles, bike racks, and landscape plantings, all that will come together on one palette to create that cohesive identity. If you're really interested in reading more into a lot of those details, I encourage you to go into the PDF document. We tried to distill that down for the purposes of the website so it wasn't too wordy. And I think there's a lot of good information, example imagery in there. I'd encourage you to go read and get an understanding of why we're recommending some of the things we are for downtown in those details. Other benefits, an updated and inspired wayfinding and identity framework. And Alex will go into this a little bit further, but the new gateway elements and wayfinding signage will all help to improve the identification and branding of the downtown district. It's one of those kind of key components of the streetscape. So while it might seem like a small element, it's one of those things that really helps us define the downtown district. Based on some of that public feedback, we also look for things to improve pedestrian safety, comfort, and accessibility. And this is not just when we say accessibility, what we're really specifically referring to here is making sure our streetscape adheres to current accessibility requirements required by ADA. So things that might be enhanced in the downtown area would be crosswalks, pedestrian bump outs or curb extensions, They're kind of called both names sometimes. And looking at potential areas for pedestrian refuge islands along streets to improve the walkability. This is all about giving pedestrian user comfort walking through downtown, that they don't feel intimidated or pressure from vehicular traffic. Sometimes cars speeding by can make for an uncomfortable environment for us to walk in. Other things that might improve that pedestrian safety and comfort would be things like new paving. So we don't have, for instance, lips that might impede a wheelchair user, new seating opportunities to encourage gathering in the downtown, pedestrian scale lighting, which we do currently have along Trenton Street, but it would be good to extend that throughout the downtown area. Things that at nighttime present a scale of comfort for a user. New and improved public gathering spaces. Obviously, I think as we've seen as the pandemic has gone on for the last couple of months, the need for quality outdoor space in all of our communities. There's sort of a new focus on what we can do with those spaces. And Alley Park has been gaining a lot of momentum as we were going through this plan. And then I think as we've seen, as the COVID pandemic has gone on, the need for spaces like Alley Park and to again, increase the permanence of that project within the downtown area. And we'll share some of those images. And we know that the Downtown Business Owners Association is working on things like providing shade structures in Alley Park. So those are things that we're going to be focused on moving forward. And this plan will just be a framework for what might happen within those areas. As well as Alex mentioned, the replacement of aging infrastructure in downtown. Things that you don't necessarily see from the surface, or you might see really blatantly on the surface, like for instance in the downtown, the electrical overhead lines, but also things like the sanitary sewer, portable water, gas, and storm sewer systems that are underground. We do note that as part of this, we have a lot of detail in the PDF document itself, but that will be an item that will need further study moving forward to ensure that the infrastructure replacement is targeted and specific to what the downtown needs are going to be in the future. We'll run through the existing conditions images here. Obviously, you all are very familiar with downtown, but this is kind of a critical piece for us to really understanding as we come into a community what the needs are going to be. The great thing about the downtown area in terms of the existing conditions is that we've noted things like we have the landmark destinations like Alley Park. We have things like proximity to Ouachita River. We know that we have a great art culture and dedicated business community. We have unique and recognizable art murals in the downtown. And we also have those special events that we mentioned that will attract visitors to the downtown. So there's a lot of stuff that is really going the right direction for the downtown area. What we're kind of focused on again was infrastructure improvements to continue to support that momentum that downtown has and the growth that it is seeing right now. As Courtney mentioned as well, it's a Louisiana Main Street designation now, as well as part of the downtown as part of the National Register Historic District. So we have 62 National Registry eligible structures within or directly adjacent to our study area. Again, that's another thing that's unique to downtown West Monroe. That's something that should be capitalized on. And again, the point of this streetscape plan is to help reinforce those projects moving forward. As we noted though, if you look at these images here, the streetscape in downtown has not necessarily had that cohesive design. We have different situations of parking and the way it's been handled in terms of stall depths, stall dimensions, drive lane widths, etc. And you'll see that in some of the sections coming forward here. But we also have things that we need to work on, like ensuring that we have four-way accessible intersections so that users have the option to choose their path of travel around downtown. We'd like to make sure that somebody, if they want to go directly across the street, can do the shortest distance possible. Otherwise, we're encouraging things like jaywalking or unsafe pedestrian crossings. You'll note here, one of the things that we tried to highlight as part of the existing conditions is what we call the inconsistent, basically kit of parts, if you will, which are things like the hardscape design and layout, in particular drive lane spacings and sidewalk sizes, as well as things like landscaping, lighting, and utilities throughout downtown. Again, since there have not really been any comprehensive guiding documents created to date, various parts of our study area have obviously evolved without a cohesive vision. These sections here really try to highlight on both Trenton, Commerce, and Cotton Street, the discrepancies between the different streets and how they're laid out. That's one of the things that you'll see as we get into the proposed plan. that we have really tried to focus on to create a consistency within the downtown area. That way, so if somebody's walking along Commerce and Cotton Street, it feels like you're walking in a similar streetscape to what you might see on Trenton Street. So again, trying to bring some of the focus in downtown, not just on Trenton Street, but on some of the adjacent streets where there's a little more vacant businesses. And it gives us some opportunity to create new growth within downtown. As we noted before, traffic speeds on Trenton are a particular concern, especially given our current head-in parking configuration. This does create a challenge with backing out at certain times of day when there's high traffic loads in the morning or afternoon. Some of this is also related to the north end of Trenton Street heading towards Bridge Street. You'll see in our plan recommendations that we've suggested doing some curb narrowing in this area as part of some street reconstruction work that may be coming in the near future. This is all part of a process to slow traffic coming into downtown by starting to not provide that large runway of space, if you will, to the north, and promote a little bit of a slower traffic speed. Things like street trees will also kind of help to squeeze that visual feel of the north end of Trenton Street down and try to encourage a little bit of slower traffic coming into downtown. Again, I would encourage you to look through our PDF document, in particular with regards to the parking comparisons. In the proposed plan, there is a detailed breakdown of the parking stall counts in our proposed plan, which I'll describe to you verbally here today. But one of the things that we did focus on in some of our previous meetings is understanding the scale of downtown and what that means for a pedestrian user. The image on the left here, you can see a couple of walking radiuses that have been provided. One is a 1 minute walking radius. The outer ring is a 2.5 minute walking radius. We have provided a existing parking count of the downtown area, which in general, there's about 298 spaces plus or minus in downtown. It's a little bit tough to tell sometimes because frankly, a lot of the stalls that are out there that might be used aren't necessarily marked as such. You'll notice that on sort of the north end of Cotton Street in particular, there's some areas behind the businesses on Trenton that it's a bit difficult to tell what's a parking spot and what's dumpster access, etc. But the important thing here is the scale. What's the scale of the downtown area like? So this circle you see here is a similar 2.5 minute walking radius to what you just saw in the image on the left. That is your Walmart in West Monroe. So it's important for us to understand that the scale of this, you know, a lot of us go to Walmart, we park halfway back in the parking lot, and then we walk to the back of the store. We can present a more pleasurable experience here than I hope we have walking through the Walmart parking lot. Something that is unique and different to downtown West Monroe, and encourage people to do those longer walking distances over time. As Alex also noted, the infrastructure is a major component, not necessarily just in what we have to do to make the downtown successful, but also in the visual perception of downtown. In particular, the overhead lines will need a lot of further study moving forward to put together the detailed cost analysis on what the cost will be to bury that. The scope and complexity of what is on the overhead poles in the downtown area is a large undertaking. But it is something that will be truly transformative to the downtown if we can get those wires put underground. One of the other things to consider as we move forward into the infrastructure recommendations in this plan, though, when these wires are put underground, there's the opportunities to do things like shared utility trenches, place additional conduits in those shared utility trenches in the downtown as we coordinate that infrastructure improvement work. This will allow us to bring either additional fiber capacity down the road to promote additional businesses in the long run. But there are various opportunities that undergrounding utilities will present beyond just the aesthetic side. Things that will help encourage additional businesses to come to the downtown area. We do note there are also things like the overhead catenary wires that support the seasonal holiday lighting and special event lighting that might occur. All those things will need discussion with city staff on what the appropriate plan is moving forward. But again, cleaning up that visual clutter will again be a very transformative look for the downtown just in and of itself. We also note that we want to improve the pedestrian and bicycle experience, as Alex mentioned, based on the public feedback that we received. Emphasis needs to be directed towards reducing traffic speeds and considering a reconfigured traffic pattern to help bring additional emphasis in eye traffic to Cotton and Commerce streets. This is in particular to support some of the placemaking recommendations about putting additional businesses that are not currently located on Trenton on some of those streets. Again, we know that there are vacant storefronts and there are plenty of opportunities on both Cotton and Commerce Street for future development. We want to encourage that as much as we can by providing sufficient parking in those areas, as well as providing a comfortable walking experience in those locations as well. Here you just see an example of some of the existing conditions, sidewalk issues. We've got signage that becomes a hindrance to pedestrian users in the instance of when I was walking the site last year. A little more photos of what the downtown conditions are. A little bit cleaner, but again, we still have things like utility boxes that are a little bit too low, that are little detail things that would need to be cleaned up in a new streetscape project. And as we've talked about before, encouraging in all the intersections in the new plan that we meet current ADA requirements. Any street reconfiguration that we do should ensure that we meet current design requirements to correct kind of those deficiencies that might exist now. Here you see an example of where we have not provided what we call a quote four-legged intersection. We're missing sort of this fourth leg. So if somebody wanted to cross the street here safely, they would have to go south and then east and then north to get back over here to where Roma's used to be. Again, a similar shot of that intersection and some of the changes that we'd be recommending. The city has invested in some of these crosswalk improvements, and we're just going to continue to encourage that and provide solutions that might be a little more permanent. Again, in the PDF document, you'll see examples of things like concrete sidewalks that are done with stamped and colored concrete that might be done in lieu of a painted solution that's currently out there right now. So the streetscape design concept for West Monroe is intended to be a dramatic reimagination of what downtown West Monroe can look like in the public realm. This is designed to, again, inspire that newfound interest in the downtown area. We think showing these public investments will help to drive interest in downtown from new and varied businesses, which is already occurring. But we really want to make sure that these public spaces can support those businesses. And in particular, this might mean providing spaces for outdoor seating or gathering that could be directly tied to some of those businesses. Again, this plan, as I mentioned earlier, is focused on creating consistency within our existing street sections. So as you see here in Cotton Street, we have a consistent 9-foot sidewalk. We've provided an area for a landscape amenity planting, 15-foot depth for angled parking, 11-foot drive lanes, a similar 5-foot landscape and amenity, and 9-foot sidewalk on the other side of the street. Trenton Street, similar character again, though we have a slightly wider drive lane due to the way we are configuring the traffic there. We need to provide a little bit more space, but we are providing a one-way drive lane on Trenton for 2 blocks. Again, a 9-foot sidewalk, 6-foot landscape and amenity, 15-foot angled parking areas. And the streetscape here will meander, so on certain sides of the street, we will have an enhanced sidewalk space of up to 16 feet. Again, with a 6-foot landscape and amenity zone between the parking and the sidewalk. And we have sorry, I apologize, we have a bit of a duplication here, but on Commerce Street, we would have a similar condition. Commerce Street will be a 13-foot drive lane with a 15-foot angled parking stall. On the west side of Commerce Street, we would have a similar 9-foot sidewalk and a 5-foot landscape and amenity area. In the east side of Commerce Street, and this is part of promoting future connectivity to the river and providing a little more walking space over there, because of many of the lots that are on Commerce Street on the east side are currently undeveloped or will be developed in the near future, but we've suggested a larger, wider sidewalk on that streetscape as well. As we get into the plan, one of the things that is key to keep in mind here, and again, you'll see some of these numbers in the final PDF report, but while we were looking at how traffic distribution comes in the downtown area, Louisiana DOTD has traffic counts that are readily available on their website. And if you look at those traffic counts, you'll see that nearly 70% of the volume that comes across or goes to the Monroe side of the Ouachita River comes across the Lee Joyner Bridge or across Bridge Street. Well, about 30% of the traffic volume is coming across the Indom Bridge on the south side of downtown. What this tells us is that there's a large split in where the traffic origins are likely coming from to come into downtown. This is something that would need to be studied in a little more detail with a detailed traffic study moving forward. But we believe that due to that split in the traffic origins, that there's a concept option for a small one-way loop along Trenton and Commerce Streets between Pine and Wood. So on Trenton Street, I'll scroll ahead here a little bit, but on Trenton Street, we would have two-way traffic north of Pine. Between Pine and Wood Street, we would have a one-way direction of travel to the south. Traffic could then come east on Wood and then come north on Commerce Street, again in a one-way direction to create that small loop. Cotton Street would stay two-way traffic, as well as traffic along Pine and Wood and Natchitoches would also stay two-way. So traffic that would be coming eastbound on Natchitoches would make a south turn onto Trenton to follow the one-way traffic that direction. Traffic could come south on Trenton and turn west on Natchitoches as well. I believe you saw in some of the previous plans that we had proposed an option of studying, closing down Natchitoches. We have decided to keep that area open as it is currently designed to help support some of the new residential housing that is in the area. So that is a change from what you saw at the last presentations back in January. So the one thing that we'd like to ensure that everybody's aware of here is that the major benefit of our concept, we believe, is to, by removing that lane width on both Trenton and Commerce Street, is that we can begin to dedicate that large significant area, this 16-foot sidewalk in particular, can be dedicated to pedestrian space throughout 4 blocks of the 6 blocks of downtown. We think this is going to allow for new opportunities like you see here, for outdoor seating or dining spaces to support new restaurants or coffee shops on these streets. We think that appealing to those businesses that operate beyond the 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. retail cycle, that we can encourage more morning and evening activities to be brought to downtown. In particular, this means things like restaurant spaces or coffee spaces, in particular. The distillery is another concept as well. This additional space will be available for seating and gathering. And it also provides increased space for us to provide additional beautification within downtown through streetscape plantings and trees, the lighting, the seating elements as well. And again, as we've noted, to support the future residential uses, we did propose a section of Natchitoches to be converted to pedestrian use only. But again, we think that's going to need much further study at a later date if that does want to be moved forward. But for now, we are proposing to keep Natchitoches open as it currently exists. Again, here are a few of those images. I think as we've seen, as again, as the kind of the COVID pandemic has gone on, the opportunity for restaurant spaces to be flexible with how they encourage outdoor dining and seating can help some of these businesses that live on fairly slim margins to survive through, frankly, an unprecedented challenge right now that we're living through. We don't know how long it will last. But giving that opportunity out there, I think we've seen a benefit to that in the last few months. And other things that you see here, again, we talk about things like pedestrian bump outs. You see them in the 2 images here. They can reduce crossing distances in the street, as well as what you can see here with the way the landscape and beautifications can enhance the downtown areas. These are just a few example images. There are additional images in the package, in the PDF package as well. This final streetscape plan was really intended to reflect the community desires and the input that we've had at the 3 public meetings and input sessions to date, the questionnaire that we had that Alex has touched on, as well as the input that we received from the steering committee and city staff. We feel that this streetscape plan, when it's implemented, will result in a safer pedestrian environment and a more attractive streetscape throughout downtown West Monroe that's going to improve that walking experience, entice businesses to relocate downtown, and enhance the gathering spaces for future community events. And there's a few bullets here that are kind of focused on the specific recommendations that we have to ensure that the streetscape plan moving forward follows. But we've also included some images of what this might look like in 3 dimensions. So for you, those of you who aren't engineers or architects and need to see things in a little bit more of a real space, this gives you a feel of that. This image here is some of the conceptual improvements that were done back in spring of 2019. This is provided courtesy of TBA Studios. These are improvements that might occur in Alley Park with shade structures and lighting. Here are the character images for the streetscape. This is Trenton Street looking south towards Natchitoches. This is Natchitoches coming in right here. This is Alley Park to your left. Just to give you a little bit of framework, this is how the one-way traffic flow might work. You can see again the enhancement of the downtown with additional plantings, the shortened pedestrian crossing so that the person trying to cross traffic here is really only going across 13 feet instead of about 40 feet or so that the current conditions exist as, or greater with higher traffic speeds. Here you see Commerce Street looking north towards Alley Park. Alley Park is right here to the left. And again, you know, here we've looked at a configuration that is, we're suggesting configuration that is angled parking with some parallel on the east side. You'll see that again in the plan. And then this image here is Cotton Street looking north from Wood Street. This really gives you a feel of how the whole block might be transformed. This is a two-way traffic block, again with angled parking. We're recommending some tree plantings in downtown, but it's on an every other planter basis, as you see. So some planters may be focused on just low-growing flowers to ensure that we have good visibility for retail businesses, while also balancing pedestrian comfort and providing future shade trees for the downtown area. One of the things you'll see if you go into the PDF document as well, that again, we didn't go into the full steps here, but there are about 6 action steps we've identified for the city to work on implementing this plan and furthering the design detail of the downtown streetscape master plan. We do recommend, you know, once this is completed, that the city start to take some of those action steps on, and I encourage you to read those again in the PDF document as well. One thing I did not touch on, which I think is a key here, and I apologize for not getting to that, is the parking counts for downtown. And going back up to the plan here real quick before we finish. As we noted before, some of the existing parking that's in downtown is approximately a 10-foot by 20-foot parking stall dimension. This is a fairly large parking stall. You might see it like if you've ever gone to a Costco type project before, you'll see large parking stalls of that scale. There are 292 plus or minus 289 of these in the downtown area. The plan that we have in front of you guys today, we are proposing a parking stall dimension of about 9 by 18 with a slightly longer stall for the parallel parking stalls to help with the circulation in and out of those spaces. They'd be about a 9 by a 22 stall. This will get us to a parking count of plus or minus 339 stalls in downtown. So in the end, what we're seeing here beyond just the beautification pieces is we're also going to realize a net gain in some parking. And this is simply because we've identified areas and we're going to add parking on some of the side streets that may not currently exist. We're going to have very focused areas where parking can and cannot occur. These numbers will obviously be subject to some change as this plan is developed. But I think the key here to keep in mind is that we'll be able to realize at least a balance in parking of what's currently out there now, but with a little bit of luck and in the more detailed studies and some assistance from surrounding businesses, we may be able to realize an increase in parking in downtown. As a result of this, one of the things that we did recommend in the PDF document, though it's not shown on this website, is also for the city to consider looking at semi-permanent parklet spaces. So while we've dedicated some areas of downtown towards wider sidewalks and the potential for outdoor dining or gathering spaces, one of the things that was pretty well received in some of our public feedback was this concept of a parklet space. And again, you'll see this in the PDF report. But we think if there are businesses that are interested in that, there are opportunities for public-private partnerships moving forward between the city and those businesses to look at doing semi-permanent parklet spaces if they're willing to sacrifice parking directly in front of their business. So they may give up 2 or 3 parking stalls in front of their storefront, but it provides an opportunity for an additional 15 foot of space that can be dedicated towards things like outdoor seating or dining spaces or gathering areas. So with that, Alex, I think I'll hand it back over to you.
Great, thanks, Greg. All right. Well, now that it's 9:15 in the morning, I guess we can officially talk about a distillery. So I'm going to jump into that priority project first. So one of the things that came out of the visioning session, as well as the survey, as I previously mentioned, was the desire for some sort of brewery, distillery, or wine bar. Obviously, those three businesses provide very different products. A brewery provides the beer, a distillery provides alcoholic spirits, and a wine bar obviously provides wine. We felt that there was a major opportunity for West Monroe to develop a distillery. And one of the unique things about our process that we tried to do through placemaking is, can we identify an entrepreneur or entrepreneurs who want to take over or own this concept? And fortunately in West Monroe, this was one of the concepts that we were able to identify an entrepreneur who did have plans for a family-owned distillery. So what we did with this plan was try to identify where is this going to go, working with existing property owners in the area so that we could put buildings that need to be rehabilitated back into commerce. Again, this could change, this could evolve, but what we wanted to try to do is provide the best foundation for that entrepreneur and also next steps. But just to give you all an idea of the market that we looked at, in 2014, there were 906 active distillers, and that number has since ballooned to more than 2,100 active producers in the country. So craft distillers and craft distilleries are becoming a really huge market, but the closest ones to West Monroe, you'd have to drive out to Shreveport, you'd have to go to Jackson, and then if not those on the I-20, you'd have to go down south. The experience we believe needed to be more of that family-oriented experience. So it's not that you're necessarily bringing your kids into a tasting room of a distillery that's producing alcoholic spirits, but we wanted to have an outdoor area where there's outdoor games, and it's something that the family can enjoy. So, you know, parents can enjoy trying some of the spirits, the kids can be playing outside. And what is really awesome about the location that we've identified is that Flying Heart Brewing and Pub, you'll see right here, is locating to downtown West Monroe, if you haven't heard about that, but that's going to be a brew pub. You're going to have beer made by their brewery, and you're also going to have pizzas and other food on the menu. We'll show you kind of a little bit of a sketch-up of what their facility will look like, but they purchased lots from the city kind of down on the riverfront there on Commerce Street. And we've spoken to them throughout this process, and they're really excited about the possibility that a distillery could be, you know, right across the way from them. So they are awesome, or really energized to work with that entrepreneur to see if they can do some joint activities outside. They're also a pretty family-friendly business, and they try to create that environment with some outdoor patio space, games, and everything else. And so that's kind of the experience that we wanted to bring to West Monroe. And so the building that we looked at was on 200 Commerce Street. You all probably recognize it here in these photos. And obviously these are not real technical SketchUps, but this is kind of what we were picturing with that distillery there. This building is, you know, something that can be used for some historic tax credits in order to help revitalize it. It is a historic building, and we believe it needs to be, you know, brought back to life. So we've been talking to that property owner for many, many months to try to see what we might be able to do. We're not sure yet if this is something where he'd like to sell. We've kind of talked a little bit more about a lease to purchase structure, but we're going to kind of let that decision be made by the property owner, but we really wanted to make that connection. And so he is familiar with the concept and is excited about it, and we're hoping to get that moving forward. So the rest of the plan that you'll see, even in the PDF here, kind of goes into the operations of the business. And I'm not going to go too much into that, but with the distillery, it is highly regulated. There are a lot of different things that the entrepreneur needs to consider. However, beyond the tasting room, which is what you're seeing here, if this were the building that ends up being used, that is really their storefront. That is their retail space. That's where they can have people try their products. But ultimately, distilleries can also grow into a much larger warehouse facility where they are distributing, throughout the state, throughout the region, and nationally and even internationally. So there's a lot of possibility for growth. And this isn't just a business that would create, 5 or 6 jobs. This could create a lot more jobs in the area if they end up manufacturing, several years down the road. The next concept I want to highlight is the food hall. And for this one, this project, we have talked to several different stakeholders that, were very interested in this concept. We haven't necessarily nailed down who is that operator or manager for the food hall. We hope to get there in time, but this is a really unique project because of everything that we're going through with the public health crisis. And so for those of you who are unfamiliar with a food hall, essentially what it is a multi-purpose facility that allows food vendors to act as tenants for a temporary period of time to sell their food. But it's also a place where you can also have a bar. It is family friendly. It is for people of all ages to enjoy multiple types of food under one roof. It allows those people who already own restaurants or maybe own food trucks or don't own either to start their business. So we're really looking at using this as a restaurant incubation facility. So it can help people kind of get on their feet. For those who may have lost their businesses, unfortunately, as a result of the crisis, this can also provide a place for them to start up without having that brick and mortar space that they own. Owning a restaurant is a huge investment, and food halls are becoming increasingly popular across the country. They've already hit urban centers all over the place, but they're also making their way into smaller communities because people like options. And I'm sure that many of you have gone to eat with your families, and the kids want this, the parents want this, and then it's hopefully it's not a big fight, but ends up turning into an event when this could be something where everyone can kind of have what they want, but it also provides a place for people to come and watch games, go to happy hour, play games out on the patio, enjoy your meal with your family and friends. For customers, the way that this would work, you walk in, you order from essentially like a virtual ordering station or a self-order kiosk. There will be a person there that would greet you if you didn't know how to use something like that. But that is what would make this financially feasible. If you're able to order on a self-order kiosk, most of your staff is in the back making the food. You've got people serving you drinks from the bar. They'll come take your drink order when you go sit down, waiting for your food. All the food comes out at once, and that's really the appeal of this. So no matter what vendor you go to, you don't have to wait in line for each separate vendor. You would order your food all at one place. You get a buzzer. When your food's ready, you go up to the front to grab it, and somebody takes your drink orders. The way that that would work for the food vendor tenants is they would pay a lease, say between $1,500 to $2,000 a month, depending on how much space they took up in the communal kitchen. They would then be able to create their own menu, working with that operator or manager who kind of controls all the pricing, so everything is priced pretty similarly. They are then working with the food distributors to make sure that they're getting all of the supplies that they need in order to cook. And that's kind of how this would work. The other opportunity that the food hall provides is a place for not only that restaurant incubation, but also for workforce training. And so that can be with youth That could be a reentry program. And so one of the things that we really focused on here is that this is a for-profit and nonprofit model. The for-profit model is really the owning of the bar or alcohol sales, the facility for any sort of rentals, events that might take place in the facility. And then the nonprofit arm is focusing on the workforce training, any sort of entrepreneurial support that might need to be provided to the small businesses. And we also believe that partnership should be happening with area high schools, also Louisiana Delta Community College, if they're wanting to use that communal kitchen in the back. The plan kind of goes into where we picture seeing this, and this is adjacent to Miss Kay's, but this is the property that we had identified for the food hall. So you can kind of get into some of the space requirements that we're looking at. This is looking to have about 190 seats, and you can also see the layout that we had created for what this might look like to give you a better idea. So this would be you entering in here. There could be a stage for different performances, karaoke night, what have you, a full wall of TVs for the game night, any sort of games that might want to be put in the back wall here. You see the communal kitchen back here, some office space where you order, all the menus and different brands that you might have, and then a ton of seating all in the middle here. You also have the outdoor patio that would provide some additional seating and games. Of course, we would want that to be shaded. I know how hot it can be in the summer in Louisiana. And then also some parking there on the side if needed. So that is the food hall. Again, you can read into greater detail in the PDF plan as well. And I might add that we also provided this concept. We've provided a concept business plan for this exact food hall. We also provided the financials for that project as well. So jumping into housing, we conducted a full needs assessment for West Monroe for what housing might be needed. So that was looking at a ton of demographic and economic indicator data. I'm not going to dig into that today. However, what I do want to note are the challenges and also development opportunities for West Monroe. So some of the challenges that we identified through the data was that existing housing supply doesn't meet the demand. And that was a lot of feedback that we received from locals. We also received some insight from realtors about the existing housing stock. From what we were told, a lot of the housing downtown is pretty much occupied. There's very few openings there. And so we want to see if we can provide some additional housing opportunities. There's also an issue with some of the deteriorating infrastructure, and that's just because the infrastructure downtown is incredibly old. Estimates are about 80 to 100 years old. And so that can make it incredibly costly for a developer to come in to build, because they will likely have to not only improve the infrastructure of the structural building, but they would also have to improve some of the infrastructure outside, depending on what utilities might need to be needed there. There's also quite a bit of blight in nearby neighborhoods outside of downtown. There were several, there was a lot of feedback about the perception of not feeling safe in some of the outside neighborhoods. And we believe that there's a way to compromise those issues there. And also that there might be some buyers financing challenges. And we noticed that in the income levels of the area, the poverty levels of the area. And again, the PDF will go through all of those pieces in detail, but we believe there might be a disconnect in people being able to go from renting to purchasing a home. Also being able to afford a down payment and to afford their mortgage, which might keep them in as renting. There was a major discrepancy in where the national average is for owner occupied versus renter. And it was essentially reversed for West Monroe. It's about 40% that own, 60% that rent. And again, nationally, that is reversed. So we want to try to find out what's going on there. So some of the opportunities that we see for West Monroe is to modernize and increase the housing stock to incentivize target populations. And what we mean by that is looking at the 30-mile radius around West Monroe. You've got ULM, you've got Tech, Grambling, and you have Louisiana Delta Community College. And so you have a lot of college students that are, once they're done with school, they get a job. Where are they going to go? Where are they going to choose to live? And a lot of young people who either choose not to or can't leave the area, why not try to incentivize them to live in downtown? That is what most young people are looking for when they leave their smaller towns anyways. So being able to create that environment. I know that the Hatchell Lofts are an awesome new addition to downtown, but being able to create that atmosphere and environment for those young people, you'll have a better chance of keeping them around. Also offering more short-term rentals. I know that we have some unique opportunities offered downtown for short-term stays, but even if you're unable to fill those rentals, being able to provide some Airbnb, VRBO, some rentals, vacation rentals for people that are passing by, whether it be for a weekend, a business trip, or a longer stay. We believe there's a good opportunity to make sure those are constantly filled and on the market if you are to produce additional housing, and that will also provide some additional revenue to those who own those buildings. And then we looked at a lot of state and federal programs that can provide some additional funding to support all of these challenges, to address those and some of the opportunities we see. So we just made a note there. So some of the development strategies that we looked at was adding additional upper story housing, and that's going to take really more of a canvassing of the downtown area to see what buildings are underutilized, what the possibilities are of putting upper story housing into some of those buildings. And we believe that we have a pretty good development financing tool for that, and I'll talk about that shortly. As many of you are probably familiar with, one of the best tools is the restoration tax abatement that would provide a little bit more incentive for a developer to do something like this, as well as the historic tax credits. And being that West Monroe does have a National Register Historic District, that's really good when it comes to historic tax credits that would allow a big chunk of the project to be provided for by those historic tax credits. I believe it would be about 40% of the total project cost between federal and state historic tax credits. So that's just another tool in the toolbox. So to address some of the new housing development that we want to see, but also to remedy some of the blight that is in some of the nearby neighborhoods, we believe it's a good opportunity for West Monroe to establish a revolving loan fund that specifically addresses housing. Their revolving loan funds can be used for a lot of different things. It can be used for operating capital, acquisition of land and buildings, new construction, facade and building renovation, landscape property improvements, and machinery and equipment. Sometimes this is used for small businesses. Other times it can be used for environmental cleanup. And in this case, we are targeting housing. And so to give you kind of an example for why this is needed, oftentimes the cost to build does not equal the cost to sell or the cost to rent. And so you can see it kind of creates a gap here in how much funding the developer might need to make this financially feasible to get a return on their investment. And so we believe using a revolving loan fund by creating 30% of that, of the loan being forgivable, essentially does not have to be paid back. And then you can offer a traditional loan, 70% of those dollars with the 1% interest over 10 years in order to incentivize the developer to build or to rehabilitate some buildings. So what we want to show here, this is the easiest way to understand. But if we had $1 million in a revolving loan fund that we capitalized, that means $700,000 of it in this case is a traditional loan that can be offered, and 30%, $300,000 is a forgivable loan. If developer ABC requested $100,000 because they want to build 5 units, but they are $20,000 short for each unit to make it work. The traditional loan would offer them $70,000 and $30,000 would be forgiven, but there's a catch. Within 6 months, the developer needs to begin construction. The developer would also need to stay with the project for 10 years. If they do those two things, then that $30,000 out of the $100,000 is forgiven, does not have to be paid back. So this is what that would look like. Since $70,000 of it was a traditional loan with an interest rate of 1% over 10 years is an additional $7,000. So that loan plus interest is $77,000. That must be paid back. However, $30,000 was forgivable, so $77,000 after that 10-year period will replenish the revolving loan fund to make additional investments into more projects. So some of the dollars will decrease over time. We will need to continue to recapitalize that. However, what we believe is with the addition of, in this case, 5 new units, the additional collection of property taxes and sales tax revenue that's generated by those new residents will be more than recouped. So that $23,000 that is not being replenished to that revolving loan fund will certainly be recouped in other areas. And that's why we believe this is an incredibly strong tool when it comes to housing development, and that's new or rehabilitating existing units. So this same scenario can work for rehabilitation as well. Lastly, what we want to show here is a timeline that you'll see. And what this is simply action steps for each of these projects to come to fruition. And so these are kind of your next steps. You can look at all of these on your own, but what we did was we identified what needs to happen, who needs to be around to make it happen, how is it going to happen, and when is it going to happen. So you can kind of see these on a timeline, and you can open each of these for each of the projects. But as you all know, all of these things cost money. And so we identified a lot of funding opportunities for these projects. And I'll go back to the local investment in a second, but you'll see a tool on this page called Federal and State Funding Opportunities. And essentially what you can do is they're filtered by the funding type, whether it be federal or state dollars, and then also the project tag. So which projects can potentially be supported by this funding opportunity. So the streetscape and infrastructure pieces are very important to this project. It's going to be the bulk of the costs. So if I were to search that, what you'll see here is I have 10 results, and you'll see a lot of different grant opportunities that can be used. And it's also a way for us to say this can happen, this should happen, because funding is available. When you click on one of these opportunities, it'll give you a quick synopsis, this is the agency, a description of the opportunity, how much money is typically allotted, when the application cycle is typically, and also how to apply. And we wanted to provide this as a tool, especially for the city, but also for everyone else, just to see that the funding is available. However, with most of these grant opportunities, we do need to be mindful that local investment is necessary to make these projects happen. If you've been paying attention to a lot of the investments that have occurred in West Monroe, a lot of times it is because of the federal programs or state programs that are being taken advantage of, but oftentimes it is either required or it makes your application more competitive if local investment is part of the equation. And sometimes that means cash, sometimes that means in kind, but most often it is a cash match. The other opportunity that West Monroe has is the official establishment of the Economic Development District in the downtown area. And those dollars are essentially reinvested back into downtown to improve the district. And that will be really, really important in order to move these projects forward, as well as any sort of charitable donations that might be able to support the cause. But all of those pieces will also unlock a lot of these federal and state funding opportunities. So it's really, really important to get some buy-in there, and it will pay off tremendously. Sometimes it's just, you know, a 10%, 20%, 50% match, but if you're able to bring in, you know, millions of dollars into your community, that'll repay over and over for many years. That is the plan. That is the website. Courtney, I'm not sure if you want to do any questions or not, but I'll leave it open, leave the floor open now.